does look kind of like a hallucination from here, doesn't it? Like, did you all just see what I saw? Like, the huge bear over there.
It's a large rodent.
There's a large white bear over there. It's like, I'm not the only one seeing that, am I?
Christmas carol.
Yeah, it is. We just walked into a big Hallmark cart. I mean, suddenly it's so cute. You know, that's a totally adorable scene.
I know, especially those kids.
These two are like the poster children.
You grab the white strap. Come here. Here, I'll put it in terms maybe you understand better, Ron. Doing the bump. Doing the... Yeah. Okay, do it.
Let go?
No, pull down vigorously.
Should I let go now?
Did I say stop?
Perhaps the greatest Siberian Husky who lived. He delivered antidotes for diphtheria during the epidemic in Nome, Alaska in 1920. Here portrayed with his salivating, his tongue hanging. I suppose just at the end of the journey. The only original ingredient to the current ecosystem surrounding us, called, for the sake of convenience, Central Park, the only original element to this entire chemical experiment is the rock. Note the rock. For the rock is the pedestal for this gigantic statue that we call, for the sake of convenience, New York City. And this entire thing that we call New York City is a melodrama taking place on the backsides of rocks. I have had some conversations with rocks in this park, and they're all laughing as they watch, fascinated, the most complicated mammal on the planet currently attempting to enjoy the afternoon. They've been doing it for years. It's one of the great spectator sports, according to the rock. The entire city is a geology poem. The rocks were large in the southern tip of the island, and that's where you get really big buildings and big vaults filled with gold. Then the rocks would sink in an area called Lispinard Meadows. It was a meadow area. There was rock there, but much deeply sublimated under the topsoil. That's where you get things like Greenwich Village, Soho, Chelsea, neighborhoods that become famous for preserving their 19th century architecture, not having big buildings. And that was certainly not the work of preservationists nor poets. That was the work of the rocks. It's where the rocks were. The Empire State Building's foundation is 50 feet deep, a shallow hole for 102 stories of granite and limestone. That's how solid and how large the rocks of Midtown Manhattan are, and how close to the ground the rocks of Midtown Manhattan are. And those gargantuan rocks that are the punctuation of this park sink again into a plains known as Harlem, and the rocks rise again to the north, creating Washington Heights. An enormous rock undulating is the poetry of this place and the ongoing stage of this performance. So note the rock as we move along. Each tree is greeting you in its own individualistic way. Each one has a different formation of branches reaching out to you, and all sorts of ingenious gestures that are indeed welcoming you, as these twin elms and their ceiling of leaves form what is known as the Mall, or Literary Walk, which is the formal promenade, the formal entranceway into Central Park, according to the original design, which took place between 1858 and the 1870s, depending on who you ask. And as we move with each step into this labyrinth, this 842 acres of naturalistic landscape, what we're moving into is totally choreographed spontaneity. Nature that's meant to be just an outburst, meant to look like just a complete, pure expression of nature, but that is absolutely choreographed every inch. And the only straight linear line in the entire 842 acre design of Central Park is this, on either side of it. The mall is kicked off by the statues of Christopher Columbus and William Shakespeare, I think because they were both characters in the literature of the world that were fearless in the realm of experience. And fearlessness in the realm of experience, I think, is the mantra of the original Central Park. This is a place for us to experience life fully, even though we're in the middle of civilization. Decides to remove the sheep flock from Sheep's Meadow because of incestuous relations between them. They had become
New Yorker.
No, the sheep themselves living out really the personification of what was going on around the park, because whenever the economy suffers, as it did in the 1930s, the park suffers and the sheep suffered.
Fun body, Steve was calling. Fun body.
Doing well.
Yes.
So what do you think?
I think the extreme close-up is going to be an interesting shot.
What do you think about this whole
What do you think about New York? I think I miss it very much.
What do you think about this show here?
I love being an actor in the show. This is my first. I've done some print work before. You might have seen me in the Schwab brochure that came out last week. It's the first piece in my book. This is my first film work.
Government had furnished 2 gardeners for the 842 acres of Central Park. Their budget was so dismal that they could at most provide 2 gardeners for the entire park. And so the Central Park Conservancy was a formation formed by aristocrats, basically. People like Jacqueline Onassis,
I don't know yet.
Raised a lot of money and built an organization that would assist the park department. There's the Bethesda fountain in front of us, which we, because to me, like, a lot of the theme of Central Park is healing. And a lot of the theme of New York City is healing. Seems to me the city is a sacred geometric configuration built and equipped for our healing. And what New York City actually is a tribal summoning of ancient agony and ancient conflict brought from around the world to a new landscape for healing. And what is a New Yorker? I don't really know. It's just a series of syllables emanating from my esophagus right now. But I think that if I had to come up with an answer, I would say a New Yorker is a soul running wild with healing, running wild with the possibility of healing, and running into the adventure of healing. And we all know that healing is a messy process. It's not clean. It's turbulent. It's full of crisis and explosions and fire. So that it may be a mess, but it is the process nonetheless. And that's why Central Park is here to remind us of how functional things can be in such a giant dysfunction. It's also one of the more photogenic bridges of the park. It's been in a lot of movies. It was in Highlander.
There can be only one.
Heavily portrayed, and a very important scene in Highlander took place on the Bow Bridge.
It's good. Oh, my favorite.
One thing that did happen was that Fifth Avenue and Central Park West were created, and they immediately become plush, like excellent real estate. And you can see here, good view of Central Park West, the different potpourri of architectural fashions and dynamic choices being made with the architecture. People really going for it over there, noting that they're building some of the creme de la creme of addresses in New York City. The Dakota, with the 3 gables, is the first building of what's known as the Upper West Side, which was mostly an area that had been reserved for pig farming.
I don't know what you're thinking.
I was eating your sheep.
It's a great view too. I mean, I like this view, but I like this view too. And when I was given an assignment with these 4 Italian men from Italy, they were all 4 of them different heads of the Carpenters Union of Italy. And we started the day with a tour of a carpentry school that was down on Houston Street. I mean, this is when tourism becomes a safari, When I was 15 years old and sitting in the corner of the high school cafeteria in shadows, did I ever envision that I would be a man getting a morning tour of a carpentry school on Houston Street with 4 leading Italian union men? And then we had a limousine and a translator, and we went to lunch. And they ordered like 20 entrees, 4 bottles of wine. It was a great tour. It was one of the greatest tours I've ever done. And then we could drive anywhere in the city we wanted. We had all afternoon, And so I immediately drove up here and walked them down this path into this grass with this view, because I thought this was a great place to start. I mean, when I think of New York, this is one of the first images that occurs to me. And all 4 of them lied out on the grass. Like, I hung out for another hour just to hang out. They weren't going anywhere. That was perfect.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Awesome.
I'm not in town. You guys
You know, we're irrational and we're rational. We're practical and we're impractical. You know, this place, this is a city where there is a lot of practicality represented and encouraged on a daily basis. Impracticality is a little bit more endangered here. So I think it's beautiful to have this brave interruption of botany that is pronouncing the irrationality of nature and the spontaneity of winds and the change of seasons amongst all the rigid and linear thinking that goes on in the city. Impracticality, I think, is just as important, if not more important, than practicality, myself, my own experience. That's a good view of rocks and jazz. I thought we'd just have a momentary dance floor. It's perfect because it's kind of off the path. Originally there was 2,500 strawberry plants planted in strawberry fields, along with the botanical renovation that included over 100 different botanical gifts from nations from around the world. But the 2,500 strawberry plants failed. Soil, artificial. The squirrels, the raccoons, and the Norwegian rats, avaricious. And so, together,
Combo.
there was nothing but demise that awaited the new, fresh strawberry plants of strawberry fields. But, you know, from the song's point of view, I think it makes a lot of sense, since I feel that the strawberries in strawberry fields were probably meant to be hallucinogenic. And so we go to strawberry fields now to imagine strawberries. Yeah, apparently we're living in this tidal time of cruise-anti-cruise dynamic. Two gravities pulling on each other equally. That's where we're at. We just experienced it.
I know.
I experience it every day. I dance with the anti-cruise, but I don't respect it. You know, I deal with it, but I dance with it the way Muhammad Ali dances with it.
The building's guy goes.
Dances with a contender. I dance with the anti-cruise that way.
Does the cruise ultimately win out over the anti-cruise? Does the cruise ultimately win out over the anti-cruise?
Well, I think in the contest between joy and joylessness, joylessness is the parasitic partner. Joy is self-sufficient. It's joylessness that needs joy to have a purpose, to have a shelf life of any kind. And that's why I think joy wins out in the end, because it's self-sufficient.
So here I am with Speed Levitch, worldwide famous cruiseman, and number one force crusader against the anti-cruisers, right?
Thank you, thank you.
He dances with them, but he doesn't fraternize or
I have no respect for them.
or no respect for
No
them.
respect for them at all.
And but we have seen today a little bit of anti-cruisers, and but they didn't win. They didn't win. I mean, we in the end.
Bubbles, don't let the bubble bursters do it. Transcend.
Exactly.
Yeah, keep floating. Stay transparent. Stay round. Keep it alive in all directions, and especially up. Thank you for having the courage to be alive. And remember that there's nothing urgent, nothing more urgent than your next breath. This is Speed Levitch reporting live and direct from Central Park, one of the great pieces of architecture in New York City. Hello, Eric. It's Timothy Speed Levitch. Just got back to New York City myself. How's it going here for you? Meet me, us, a whole group of people, Sunday, tomorrow, 1 o'clock, at the Oak Bar in the Plaza Hotel, which is 60th Street, just off Fifth Avenue, We're going to have a round of drinks at 1 o'clock in the Oak Bar in the lobby of the plaza, and then go out for a walking, lounging tour of Central Park. We'd love to have you. I've been charging $25 a head, if that's okay. Bring anybody and everybody. And I'll also be leaving this information on my outgoing message at 212-636-9324, where you can also leave a message if there's any more questions. And keep it alive, Eric. I look forward to seeing you.
End of message.